The flashing red and blue lights in Olivia Carter's rearview mirror made her sigh. Not again. She pulled over, already bracing for whatever nonsense was about to unfold. Officer Greg Miller strutted up to her window, his hand resting on his holster like she was some kind of threat. License and registration. No good evening, no reason given for the stop. Just straight to the attitude. Olivia kept her voice steady. May I ask why I was pulled over? Miller's partner, Officer Tom Reynolds, leaned in from the other side. You got a problem following orders, lady? Olivia exhaled slowly. This was going south fast. I don't have a problem. I just want to understand why I was stopped. Miller scoffed. Figures. Always got to run your mouth instead of just listening. He nodded at Reynolds. Step out of the car. Olivia stayed put. I don't believe I've done anything wrong. Miller's expression darkened. You're resisting now? Resisting? She hadn't even moved. Reynolds yanked at the door handle. Locked. Step out of the car. His tone was pure hostility. Olivia realized they weren't looking for a conversation. They were looking for control. All right, she said, keeping her hands visible as she unlocked the door. I'm stepping out. But the second her foot hit the pavement, Miller grabbed her wrist, twisting it behind her back. See? This didn't have to be difficult. A crowd started forming, phones out, recording. I'm not resisting, Olivia said firmly. Reynolds smirked. They all say that. Click. The cuffs locked around her wrists. And just like that, Judge Olivia Carter was under arrest. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into Olivia's wrists. But the real sting was the humiliation. She had spent her entire career upholding the law, ensuring justice was served fairly. And now? Now she was being treated like a common criminal. Just another black woman they thought they could push around. Officer Miller's grip on her arm was tight, almost punishing, as he shoved her forward. His partner, Reynolds, followed close behind, his smug expression making her stomach turn. I need you to listen carefully, Olivia said, keeping her voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. You're making a huge mistake. Miller let out a dry laugh. Oh yeah, and what mistake would that be? She met his gaze, her dark brown eyes unreadable. You'll find out soon enough. Reynolds chuckled, shaking his head. Lady, you ain't special. You act up, you get cuffed. Simple as that. The bystanders watching the scene unfold weren't buying it. Phones were up, cameras rolling, capturing every second of the so-called arrest. Yo, she ain't even do nothing, someone in the crowd shouted. This some racist BS, another voice called out. A woman standing on the sidewalk with her young son looked horrified. I know you boys see we watchin'. You gonna arrest her for what? Existing? Miller's jaw tightened, his grip on Olivia's arm becoming more forceful. You people always think the rules don't apply to you. Olivia inhaled sharply. You people. Oh, so they were that kind of cops. I'm asserting my rights, she said evenly. You had no probable cause to pull me over. No reason to demand I exit my vehicle, and absolutely no grounds for this arrest. Miller sneered. You sound like one of those know-it-all lawyers. Close, Olivia replied, a ghost of a smirk on her lips. But you'll find out soon enough. Reynolds scoffed. Yeah, I've heard it all before. Now shut up and get in the damn car. He yanked open the squad car door and shoved Olivia inside like she was some thug off the street. The impact sent a sharp jolt of pain up her shoulder, but she refused to flinch. Hey, that was excessive, man, someone in the crowd yelled. Another woman stepped closer, her phone practically in Miller's face. Say your badge number real quick, she taunted. The two officers ignored the growing tension, slamming the car door shut. Olivia sat stiffly in the back seat, staring out the window at the people who had witnessed it all. The fire in their eyes, the rage in their voices. It was familiar. She had seen it before, too many times. But today, she wasn't just a witness. Today, she was the one in cuffs. And that was their biggest mistake. As the squad car pulled away, Olivia kept her head high, her lips pressing into a thin line. They thought they had arrested just another black woman, but they were about to learn the hard way. They had just handcuffed a federal judge. The fluorescent lights in the station buzzed faintly, casting a harsh glow over the dingy holding area. Olivia sat on the cold metal bench, her wrists still sore from the too tight cuffs. Around her, the low murmur of officers chatting and the occasional clatter of paperwork filled the air. It was a familiar environment, but she had never been on this side of it before. Miller and Reynolds stood nearby, their laughter grating against her nerves. "You see the look on her face when we took her in?" Miller snorted. "Bet she thought she was special." Reynolds smirked. "Yeah, probably one of those I know my rights types, always thinking they're smarter than the law." Olivia's fingers flexed against her thighs, her nails digging into the fabric of her slacks. They thought this was a joke. They thought she was a joke. She lifted her chin and leveled them with a cool stare. "I'd like to speak to my lawyer." Miller turned, raising a brow. "Oh? You suddenly got nothing to say now?" "I have nothing to say to you without legal representation," Olivia corrected smoothly. Reynolds clicked his tongue. "See, that's funny. 'Cause from where I'm standing, you don't really get a say in how this goes." She tilted her head slightly. "No, we'll see about that." Miller rolled his eyes. "Lady, you ain't some VIP. You got pulled over, you acted up, and now you're here like everybody else. Welcome to the real world." The words were meant to break her down, to strip her of any dignity she had left. But Olivia wasn't just anybody. She didn't flinch, didn't shrink. She simply smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made Miller's own falter just a little. Across the room, the desk sergeant was watching. Sergeant Bill Carter had been in the force long enough to recognize when something wasn't adding up. The woman in front of him wasn't panicked. She wasn't rattled like most people in her position. No yelling, no bargaining, no desperation. No, this woman sat there like she was waiting for something, or someone. Carter frowned, glancing at the booking sheet in front of him. Olivia Carter. That name nagged at something in his memory. Then he looked at her again. Really looked. Her posture, the way she carried herself, the way she refused to let the two officers break her composure. She had authority in her bones. His stomach tightened. Something wasn't right here. And judging by the unreadable expression on Olivia's face, whatever it was about to blow up in Miller and Reynolds' faces. Miller leaned against the desk, arms crossed, his smirk never leaving his face. "Hope you're comfortable, lady. You're going to be sitting in a cell until we process your case. Then you'll get to explain yourself to a judge." Olivia raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "A judge, huh?" Reynolds chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah. And judging by your attitude, I'd say you're in for a rough time." At that, Olivia smiled, cool, effortless. "Oh, I look forward to it." Her confidence unsettled them, though neither would admit it. Miller pushed off the desk, waving a hand dismissively. Yeah, keep that same energy when you're standing in front of the bench." Across the room, Sergeant Carter was sweating. He had stepped away from the scene, gripping the phone tightly as he dialed a number he never thought he'd need in a situation like this. "Hey, yeah, it's Carter," he said in a hushed voice. "Listen, I need you to check something for me real quick. We just booked a woman, Olivia Carter, and I need to know if—" The voice on the other end cut him off. Carter's throat went dry. His free hand clenched into a fist as he listened, his face paling with every word. "Wait, what?" A cold sweat prickled at his skin. His eyes flicked back to the woman sitting calmly in the holding area, completely unbothered, while Miller and Reynolds continued their smug little power trip. Carter swallowed hard. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a full-blown disaster waiting to happen. Miller adjusted his tie, throwing a cocky grin at Reynolds as they strolled into the courtroom. "This is going to be over in 10 minutes, he muttered. "We tell the judge she resisted. They believe us. We walk out. Easy." Reynolds chuckled, flipping through his notes. "Yeah, standard procedure. She had an attitude, made it worse for herself. You know how this goes." The courtroom was alive with murmurs as people settled into their seats. A few reporters were present, probably bored out of their minds, waiting for something interesting to happen. Miller didn't care. He'd done this 100 times. No big deal. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Olivia Carter," the bailiff suddenly announced. Miller barely glanced up until he caught sight of the figure stepping into the room. His stomach plummeted. Reynolds went rigid beside him, fingers tightening around his folder. "No freaking way," Miller muttered under his breath, his face turning an unhealthy shade of pale. Reynolds swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "Tell me that's not—" "Oh, it is," Miller cut in, heart hammering in his chest. Olivia Carter strode to the bench, her black judicial robes flowing behind her, exuding the same quiet confidence she had the day they arrested her. But this time, there was no squad car, no handcuffs. This time, she was in charge. She sat down, adjusting her papers, with an excruciatingly slow, deliberate motion. Silence stretched across the room like a wire about to snap. Then she finally looked up, locking eyes with Miller and Reynolds. That same smooth, knowing smile curled at the corner of her lips. "Well," she said, her voice calm and composed, but carrying the weight of something sharp underneath. "Looks like we finally meet again." The courtroom remained silent, but Miller could feel every pair of eyes turning toward him and Reynolds, waiting for their reaction. His throat was dry, his palms were sweaty. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat, but no words came out. Miller wanted to blink and wake up from whatever nightmare this was. But it was real. And Judge Olivia Carter, she wasn't going to let them forget it. Miller and Reynolds sat frozen, their brains short-circuiting, as reality slammed into them like a freight train. Judge Olivia Carter, the woman they had shoved against a car, cuffed, mocked, now sitting high on the bench, staring down at them. Reynolds let out a breath that sounded more like a dying wheeze. "We're so screwed," he muttered under his breath. Miller's jaw clenched. His fingers twitched against the table. But what was there to do? There was no badge to hide behind in this room. No backup, no authority, just cold, hard consequences waiting to be delivered. Their lawyer, a jittery man named Douglas Finch, leaned in, panic bleeding through his every movement. "Okay, listen to me," he whispered frantically. "We can try to get this thrown out, say there's a conflict of interest." Olivia cleared her throat, silencing the room instantly. Finch sat back like he'd just been scolded by the principal. Miller swore under his breath. The courtroom was packed now, news having spread like wildfire. Reporters scribbled notes, cameras rolled, and behind him, he could hear hushed murmurs from other officers who had come to watch. He dared to look up at Olivia. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't smirking. No, that would have been too easy. Instead, she was calm, measured, completely, terrifyingly in control. She adjusted her robe, took her time organizing her papers, and then, finally, she spoke. "Officers Greg Miller and Tom Reynolds," Olivia said, her voice smooth as glass, but sharp as a blade. "You stand before this court today, accused of misconduct, unlawful detainment, and abuse of authority." The weight of her words pressed down on them, suffocating. Reynolds inhaled sharply, his forehead damp with sweat. Miller clenched his fists under the table. Their lawyer cleared his throat, standing hastily. "Your Honor, if I may." "You may not," Olivia interrupted, her tone razor-sharp. "Sit down, Mr. Finch, we're just getting started." The room erupted. Olivia kept her expression neutral. But deep down, she knew the weight of this moment. The irony was thick. Two officers who had strutted around like kings now sat before her, squirming in their seats. But this wasn't about personal revenge. This was about justice. She straightened her robe and calmly picked up a folder from her bench. "Let's begin." Miller and Reynolds stiffened as Olivia pulled up the first piece of evidence, the body cam footage. "Exhibit A," she said, pressing play. The courtroom fell silent as the footage flickered to life on the large screen. There they were, Miller sneering, Reynolds yanking her out of her car like she was a threat, the condescension in their voices, the way they dismissed her completely. "You're making a huge mistake," Olivia's voice echoed from the video, and now, sitting in front of her, they knew just how big of a mistake it was. Miller's jaw clenched. Reynolds avoided looking at the screen. Olivia let the video play for a few more seconds before pressing pause. "Would you gentlemen like to explain to the court why you deemed it necessary to escalate a routine traffic stop into an arrest?" Neither officer spoke. She tapped her fingers on the bench, waiting. No answer? Interesting. Let's move on. She reached for another folder. Exhibit B, witness statements. A parade of people took the stand. Bystanders who had recorded the incident. A local activist who had seen these officers harass black drivers before. Even a fellow cop who finally admitted that Miller and Reynolds had a pattern. They target black drivers. They act like they're above the law. I knew it would catch up to them one day. Each testimony was another nail in the coffin. Miller's face burned red. Reynolds gripped the edge of the table, like it could somehow keep him from sinking. But Olivia wasn't done. She turned her gaze directly on them. "Officers, would you like to refute the claim that you have a history of racial profiling?" Miller's mouth opened, then closed. Reynolds swallowed hard. "That's what I thought." Olivia sat back, folding her hands. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, what we have here is a clear abuse of power, and now these men must answer for their actions. The room buzzed. The reporters scribbled like their lives depended on it. And for the first time, Miller and Reynolds looked like they understood exactly what it felt like to be powerless. The courtroom was dead silent. Every eye was on Olivia as she sat tall behind the bench, her expression unreadable. But when she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of everything these officers had done. Not just to her, but to every person they had wrongfully targeted. "This is not just about one incident," she began, her tone razor-sharp. "This is about a pattern of behavior, a repeated abuse of authority, a complete disregard for the people you swore to protect." Miller and Reynolds sat stiff, their faces pale. The arrogance they had carried into this courtroom had been stripped away piece by piece. And now, they were just two men waiting for judgment. Olivia flipped through the file in front of her. "Officer Miller, Officer Reynolds, your records are littered with complaints, excessive force, racial profiling, wrongful arrests. And yet, until now, nothing was done." She closed the file with a sharp thud. "Well, that ends today." Reynolds shifted in his seat. Miller, jaw clenched, dared to speak. "Your Honor, we—" "No," Olivia cut him off. "You had your chance to explain. You had your chance to do your job the right way. And instead you chose to abuse your badge." Miller's mouth snapped shut. Olivia turned to the courtroom, her voice ringing out with authority. "Effective immediately. Officers Greg Miller and Tom Reynolds are to be stripped of their duties pending further investigation." Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters scrambled to jot down every word. "I am also recommending formal charges be filed against both officers," Olivia continued, her eyes locked on them. "Unlawful detainment, misconduct, civil rights violations. This will not be swept under the rug." Reynolds' face drained of color. Miller's hands clenched into fists, but he said nothing. "Furthermore," Olivia pressed on, "this court will ensure that an external review is conducted on all cases you were involved in, every arrest, every complaint, every person you may have wronged." The weight of her words settled over the two officers like a crushing force. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist. This was career-ending. Miller's lawyer whispered frantically in his ear. But it was clear. There was no coming back from this. Reynolds dropped his head, staring at the desk in front of him, realization sinking in. They had been the ones in power. They had been the ones who laughed at others' misfortune, who acted like they were untouchable. But now they were the ones being judged. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours of the courtroom showdown, headlines blared across every major network. "Officers arrest black woman. Turns out she's the judge presiding over their case." Social media exploded. The body cam footage, the courtroom video, Olivia's scathing rebuke. It all went viral. Millions watched as two cocky, racist officers were humiliated in front of the entire country. By nightfall, protesters were already outside the police department, holding up signs that read, "Justice for all" and "Badge immunity." Chants of no more cover-ups filled the streets. The public had seen too many cases like this, and now they had a face to rally behind: Judge Olivia Carter. News pundits debated the case endlessly. Some called Olivia a hero, a symbol of resilience against systemic racism. Others, mostly the usual law and order types, claimed the officers were being made an example of unfairly. But the facts were undeniable. The footage didn't lie. The officers had profiled, harassed, and arrested an innocent woman. And that innocent woman just happened to have the power to hold them accountable. Late-night talk shows roasted the officers mercilessly. One comedian joked, "Imagine being so bad at your job that you arrest your own boss. That's like pulling over your landlord for parking in her own driveway." The audience erupted in laughter. But beyond the jokes, the case sparked real discussions. Lawyers, activists, and politicians all weighed in, calling for a deeper examination of police practices. Judges across the country voiced their support for Olivia, sharing their own experiences with bias, discrimination, and abuse of power within the justice system. "This isn't an isolated incident," one prominent civil rights attorney said in an interview. This is a symptom of a much larger disease. And if a federal judge can be treated like this, imagine what happens to everyday people with no cameras around. The pressure on the police department mounted. Reporters started digging into past cases involving officers Miller and Reynolds. Whistleblowers came forward exposing a pattern of misconduct that had been ignored for years. And now, thanks to Olivia, that cycle of silence was breaking. People weren't just angry. They wanted change. And they weren't going to let this story fade away. Olivia didn't just move on. She knew this wasn't just about her. It was about every black person who had ever been stopped, harassed, or arrested simply for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, she used her voice, her platform, and her power to make sure this moment actually meant something. Within weeks, she was sitting on panels, giving speeches, and meeting with lawmakers to discuss real police reform. "We don't need apologies," she told a packed room at a judicial conference. "We need accountability. We need laws that actually prevent this from happening again." Her influence was undeniable. The Department of Justice launched an inquiry into racial bias within the city's police force, and officers were now required to undergo new training on de-escalation and racial profiling. But Olivia pushed for more. She wanted independent oversight committees to review police misconduct cases, and she fought to strip officers of their automatic immunity when they violated someone's rights. Meanwhile, officers Miller and Reynolds were finished, fired, blacklisted. No department wanted the PR nightmare of hiring two disgraced cops whose faces were now plastered all over the internet as examples of everything wrong with modern policing. Miller, the ringleader, tried to fight his termination, but the department wasn't interested in defending him. He was a liability, a former colleague admitted anonymously to a reporter. "Honestly, a lot of us knew he had problems. He just finally got caught." As for Reynolds, he disappeared from the public eye. Last anyone heard, he was working security at some rundown shopping plaza. His arrogance, his sense of untouchability, it had all evaporated the moment he realized that the system he abused had no interest in protecting him once the world was watching. But Olivia wasn't interested in their downfall. She had bigger things to focus on. She continued to rule from her bench with the same sharp mind and unwavering fairness she always had. But now, she had a fire in her that couldn't be ignored. She wasn't just interpreting the law, she was changing it. And she made one thing clear: power should never be used as a weapon against the powerless. It should be used to protect them, to serve them, to make sure justice actually means something. She wasn't going to stop until that was the reality.